Hi everyone, and welcome to the 8th episode of your free tarot course brought to you by 1millionnights.com. Now, last time we examined the symbolism and the philosophy of the Lover's card, so naturally the card which follows is the one bearing the numerological symbolism of 7, which is the Chariot card. Now, even though the Chariot has so very many different nuances and ways of interpretation, yet still its main symbolism remains the same, which is progress, forward movement, initiating something new, and then, embarking on that journey towards either completion or failure. But failure in this case is something really, really positive because it bears a lot of experience. So the next time, the next journey is going to be based on that experience, making sure that the triumph is going to be fulfilled. So regardless of the circumstances, the combinations with other cards, or which area of life this new journey, the new initiative, this new adventure or progress, or even evolution takes place, even if its completion doesn't take place, it still is a really positive event because it gives us experience, it gives us the knowledge basically of what such a journey, such an initiative, whatever we are trying to accomplish means and it's all about. So even if we do not succeed this time, based on the experience and knowledge that we gained, we can either succeed next time or we can steer our chariots in a different direction and take a new approach. So either way, it is really, really positive. And one way or another, it's still progress, even if it apparently isn't. Now, before we look at the astrology and the philosophy behind the Chariot card, we have to take a look at the number 7, a number which truly involves progress, evolution, forward momentum, but sometimes it also has a rather negative connotation because many times that progress or whatever we have to achieve, whatever we have to accomplish, or getting from point A to point B or C is due to a need, is due to a crisis, or is due to an urgency. But regardless, even if it's a crisis, even if the need is rather urgent, it is still a motivation, it is still a karmic encouragement or impulse to get on moving or to basically get out of our comfort zones, get out of our shells, get out of stagnation, for example. So even if the number 7 has an unpleasant side to it, it is still very positive on the long term, and very many times 7 is associated with some kind of negative event which ultimately turns to something really, really useful and positive in the longer term future. Like for example, chasing a dream, chasing an illusion, chasing something which it's just apparently important, regardless if you accomplish it or not, regardless if you get disillusioned before you reach the destination, or if this disillusion takes place the moment you get what you want or you reach that symbolic destination. For example, if you might be chasing an illusion, you achieve it, you get it, but it doesn't make you happy as you thought initially that it would, but it's still something really positive because that experience will ultimately make you that much wiser and stronger, and you can share it with others who might be caught up in the same illusion as you have. But of course, the positive side of the numerological symbolism of 7 is that ultimately it's still momentum, it is still dynamic, it still enables you to achieve a transformation, because if we correlate it with the Chariot, well, you are the one driving it, so you hold the steering wheel, you control where the horses or sphinxes in which direction they go, the speed at which they're traveling. So basically, it's all up to you, and that is always a really positive sign. Now, from an astrological perspective, the Chariot is linked to the sign of Cancer. One might think, well, the symbolism of the Chariot isn't that very suggestive. It might not have so much to do with the sign of Cancer, because a Cancer really, really likes comfort, it likes safety, it likes stability, it likes, emotional well-being, which means that it's not as dynamic, not as multilateral or dual as the Chariot card might suggest. But of course, all of what I said earlier, the stability, the groundedness, the comfort, has to be reached first of all. So every Cancer energy starts in the exact opposite vibration, where it doesn't have the stability, where it doesn't have knowledge, where it can also be trapped in a duality. So before a Cancer can actually put on its shell, its cocoon which protects it from absolutely everything and anything, and before it can actually learn how to nourish itself, well, it has to go on this very profound journey to conquer new ground, to seek that stability. So now, from a very general perspective, the sign of Cancer represents where we belong to, and it is this sense of belonging which actually drives this Chariot and makes it so very dynamic. And also when there is a very powerful inner call to basically find where we belong to, regardless of what that means. A family, lover, a culture, a country, a place, a work environment, absolutely anything. Well, that desire to belong somewhere or to basically embody the stable Cancerian energies can be a massive motivational force which can actually trigger karmic events, and it can actually, how should I even express this? It possesses sufficient willpower to move even the wheel of fortune, the hand of fate. That is one of the most powerful forces a human being can actually project on the universe. That is the stuff which moves mountains, so to speak. And ultimately, that is exactly why the charioteer is driving that chariot. He is going out there to conquer new ground, because either he thinks that that new ground belongs to him or belongs to his kingdom. Let's not forget that the chariot can be driven by the emperor card, so to speak, as in the symbol of the ego. So every part of your being can be at the steering wheel of that chariot. It doesn't really have to be anything pure like the higher self or the soul. It can also be the shadow self, ego. It can also be a very toxic emotion. So it doesn't really matter what drives it. What actually matters is that it's moving and it is providing the experience, good or bad, painful or pleasant. And also another correlation with the sign of Cancer. Well, sometimes Cancer just stays in one place, or in moments of big crisis, it even goes backwards. But it's absolutely fine, because Cancer, the crab, so to speak, has two very, very strong pincers where there is a big opportunity, let's say a fated one, or a moment of maximum good fortune, and it can quickly grab it and just hold it for as much as it wants to. So it won't really matter how much it went backwards, how much it stagnated, how much it stayed in its protective shell, because after it grabs that big opportunity, it's like a quantum leap. It's like the whole journey is completed in a second, and that can also be suggestive for the Chariot card, because sometimes the Chariot can be really, really quick. It can be instantaneous. So symbolically, when true and genuine need and desire, for example passion, meet and fuse into one, symbolically the two horses or sphinxes. So when they cooperate with each other, well then the chariot can move very, very, very quickly. And this is also perfectly valid from a quantic sense, because whatever you seek somehow also seeks you, even if the rational mind cannot perceive it. And of course, the chariot card is not always rational, because those two horses or sphinxes can be inner forces. One of them is always emotion, it is always a strong desire, but the other one sometimes can be like instinct, but other times it can actually be rationality. But it is exactly those times when it is not so rational, when it is triggered by really powerful unconscious energies, let's say, well, those are the times when the chariot is simply flying and soaring. But of course, when it's triggered by rational energies, when everything makes sense to your mind, you know the journey, you know what you have to do, in those times the chariot moves slowly but surely, because it's based on a certain kind of knowledge, know-how, or experience. But when that experience or know-how is lacking, and only the desire of the destination is known, that's no problem at all, because there is that thing, the beginner's luck. The chariot is a tarot card basically, which incorporates the symbolism of all the previous cards before it. So the charioteer is also the fool which has a lot of beginner's luck, also the magician, which can manipulate the four elements so it knows how to steer, also the high priestess so it knows itself at least sufficiently to trust its ability to drive that chariot, also the empress so it knows the rules which bind the physical plane together. May that be, for example, rules and regulations, customs, something really down to earth, or simply knowing that which is impossible in the earthly plane. That is also a great advantage. It's also the emperor, because naturally the emperor is the one having to conquer higher ground, having to go out, set out on this new journey to find new territory to incorporate into its empire. Also the high priest, because faith, at least faith in oneself, is absolutely necessary. And also the lovers, because either the motivational force for this is a lover, your other half so to speak, or it can be a symbol of your twin, from a quantic sense, your higher self. And still, with all this energy, with all this knowledge, with all this experience, the charioteer isn't a veteran. So regardless of how this journey can play out, it is still something pretty new. It is still something with its own challenges. So it's not something that the charioteer did over and over and over again. Meaning that this journey is also one of learning, and also one full of hazards. In classic version of the tarot, the chariot is always tracted by two horses or two sacred animals, which represents duality. And the symbolism behind this is very, very straightforward. The very nature of the universe, or at least nature herself, is dual. For example, feminine and masculine, shadow self and higher self, soul and body, psyche and rational mind, and of course us, the self, and our mirror, as in our partners, our symbolic twin, who belongs to our seventh house, so to speak. Even if it's not a romantic relationship, it can mean a partner, a business partner, or an associate, a friend, someone who joins forces with us, or many times it can also represent then when our chariot is moving, we are pulling with us, for example, a whole community, a whole family, a whole work environment, etc. So victory, triumph, progress, forward movement, evolution is shared. But at the same time, when there is disharmony, when, those two horses or sphinxes are not walking or running in the same direction, when they have different mindsets, different goals, different purposes, well, then they will pull the chariot apart and the journey stops there. The chariot is destroyed. So basically, when our beings are not in harmony, when the duality within us represents like a conflict, or there isn't any kind of cooperation, for example, cooperation between the mind and the heart, cooperation between the shadow self and the higher self, cooperation between us and people around us, well, then either the chariot stops and stagnates until the conflict or whatever that disharmonious duality is resolves itself, or it can also destroy the chariot. So the charioteer either has to walk or it has to return to where it came from and build a new chariot for itself. So in the following, let's take a look at what the chariot can represent in different combinations and different circumstances. Well, on its own, it's pretty straightforward. It represents, as I said, triumph, victory, conquering new ground, successful transition, initiative, fulfilled, of course. It can also represent journey, as in physical journey, travels, especially through air or through water, so long distance travels, to places or to see people who you either haven't seen or experienced before, or the experience is very, very little and you want more of it. Either way, if the chariot just pops up on its own, it's usually a really, really good sign that the universe is conspiring in your favor, and this journey, even if it's a symbolic one, even if it's, for example, just evolution, just getting from a state to another, or if it's something truly physical, professional, material, it's still something really favorable. And chances of success are pretty high as long as you stay focused and as long as you discipline yourself and use your willpower in a very constructive manner. Now, in reverse position, it really, really depends, because sometimes it can mean that what you desire, the need to progress, the need to conquer higher ground, the need to achieve triumph and victory, is not really favorable right now, or your present moment circumstances do not permit this. But at the same time, it can also simply mean that you don't really have to do anything, because the opportunity is coming your way anyway. So all you have to do is seize it, grab it, use your Cancerian pincers, and grab hold of it when you see it. The Chariot is a tarot card, which usually needs clarifiers if your question is not straightforward. If it's very logical and rational, for example, how am I going to do at this new job, and the chariot pops up, well, it's straightforward. You're at the start of your journey and it's gonna be really fun, adventurous, and you're gonna achieve triumph. But when, for example, you just ask for guidance without a specific question, well, then the chariot usually needs clarifiers, because you want to know the nature of that journey, the nature of the momentum, of the movement, of the dynamics of it all. So when there is an earthly card attached to it, for example, coins, it can mean something material. When there is swords attached to it, it can mean something mental, intellectual, communication. When there is wands attached to it, it can represent something that you desire, that you will, or a true travel in a physical, in a practical sense, or someone visiting you. If it's a Cups card which is attached, well, it can be something psychological, emotional, or even spiritual. If there is a major arcana attached to it, well, then you have to basically weave together the symbolism of these two cards. Like the Chariot and the Emperor is very simple. You get what you want. You get what you desire. You lead by example and you achieve victory. The Empress, you are on your journey or on the road to prosperity or love. Or the Tower, for example. Be careful, rethink your journey, rethink what you desire or the path that you are on, because it can either lead to something very unexpected or to disaster. Or for example, the Devil, someone might be manipulating you, or your principles and your inner truth, driving that chariot or the GPS, so to speak, is flawed, it is corrupted. The Wheel of Fortune, something massive is heading your way, or you're on your journey, karmically speaking, to achieve or to accomplish something really, really important and significant, and naturally the universe is conspiring in your favor. Or the Wheel of Fortune reversed, the universe is really sorry, but you have to do this on your own, using your own inner forces without too much help, because this might be either a karmic test or a fated event. But since the Chariot is such a positive card, and most times it is the bearer of good news or a favorable moment in your life, let's rather focus on the times it means something really negative, because those are much rarer combinations. So the Chariot with the 7 or 5 of swords can represent lies, deception, gossip, manipulation, someone backstabbing you. As I mentioned earlier, the Chariot with the Tower is usually a not very favorable sign. The Chariot with the Judgment reversed, for example, it means that you are achieving progress, but your perceptions about it are really twisted, or you have a very closed mindset. Which in itself, it's not anything negative, just that you will have to rethink and reprocess this whole journey that you are on. The Chariot, for example, with the High Priestess reversed, can represent that you are on your journey, but you are driven by unconscious forces much more than it is healthy. So maybe get a little grip on everything that is happening in your life, or go within and find certain answers deep inside of you. The Chariot with the 5 of Cups, for example. Be very careful not to have high expectations from yourself or other people, because you might be disappointed, because things might not work out the way you imagine. Chariot with the 7 of Cups reversed, for example. You are on your journey to disillusioning. Even though it is something needed and positive, it might still be a little bit painful and it might sting a little bit. Chariot with the Hanged Man. Well, you are achieving victory, the triumph is there, but maybe that triumph is a path to self-sacrifice, making the lives of others, for example, more easier than it is acceptable, karmically speaking. So be careful not to drive your chariot towards martyrdom. Chariot and Sun reversed or Emperor reversed. Be very careful, because it is your ego driving you. Chariot and 9 of Wands reversed, for example. Slow down, because if you keep up this pace, you're going to burn out. So yes, you are doing very well. You have everything that you need for your journey towards triumph and victory, but slow down. Chariot and 10 of Wands. Your journey is something destined, it is karmic, it is actually guided by inner and divine forces, but be very careful, because you're heading towards obstacles, so don't be discouraged. And Chariot and 10 of Swords is one of the hardest and most painful combinations, because it says that it's not possible. Whatever you desire is not possible. Or if your desire is to save a situation, or basically to avoid defeat or having to surrender, well, it's not avoidable. Chariot and Three of Swords, you're heading towards heartache and pain, and there's nothing you can do to actually avoid it, neither should you, because it will be a moment of truth, a painful truth, but truth nonetheless. Now let's take a look at the most favorable combinations, which usually are situations which are just too good to be true, but they still get to be true. The Chariot and two aces, for example, usually regardless of which aces they are, that can represent a moment where the opportunity is massive. Chariot and the Nine of Cups, a powerful fulfillment where the victory is going to reverberate in space and time, to be understood symbolically, of course, where that happiness is going to stay with you for a very long time. Chariot with the Lovers and Two of Cups, for example, that can mean a romance of your dreams. Chariot, Ace of Coins, and the Wheel of Fortune, that can represent a massive gain, a win. Or, for example, if you are in a really bad situation, or in like a deep depression, the Chariot with the Star card, or Chariot, Star, and Ten of Swords reversed, means that even though your situation seems totally hopeless, it is still going to turn out in a very favorable way. Or Chariot, the Fool, and the World card, especially if you're in a bad situation, it means where one door closes, another one, which is way better than you could possibly imagine, will open for you. Well, thank you so much for listening. This concludes the 8th episode analyzing the Chariot card. Stay tuned for next week, where we're going to analyze the Strength card and the symbolism and philosophy behind it. Thank you for listening. Wish everyone a blessed day. Bye for now.